So where did the whole fitness industry thing come from for you? Where did it start?
Look, similar to you, I grew up playing pretty much all sports. Loved them. Obviously had a couple of sports that you chose to continue to put more time into as I got older. And then through wanting to be better for those led me to training. So just starting to some sort of fitness. If I was to look back at it, it's quite amusing to what I would have been doing, I'm sure.
I remember you threw a barbell into your face one day. I remember that.
That's when I was meant to have known what I was doing. But well earlier than that, I used to move a barbell around a little bit. But then just through my natural interest for knowledge, made me read a little bit more. And then through training for the sports, got me to a point. Then I chose to join the Air Force, which was to follow in my grandfather's footsteps. And then to train for that just made me sort of read a little bit more. So, I mean, it's a really soft introduction to the fitness industry, but I thought, okay, this is what I need to do. And I wanted to know what I had to do to make sure that I'd perform well. Then going through the first couple of years of the Air Force, it's a physical or PT in defence is huge, and they had physical training instructors, and they used to take us for PT. There were some brutal sessions, but I loved it, and I thought. But even these guys taking us, I thought, that'd be awesome. Like that'd be so much fun. And then from there, it was just within a year after that, I had to finish my trade training in the Air Force. But once I'd done that, I started doing my Cert 3 and 4 online, and then decided that it's what I want to do in the Air Force. So that was how I got into the fitness industry, and then the expansion from there was, there's a few avenues that I've been down.
Yeah, you've done everything.
So,
you've done everything for sure.
Yeah.
So when you're a PT, it's PTI?
Yeah, physical training instructor.
Physical training instructor.
Yeah.
When you're a PTI in the Air Force, what does the day-to-day look like? Like how often are you training the guys? What does a session look like? Tell us about the inner workings of it again.
Well, it really depends where you're posted. So it depends on your unit and how many people you've got. But day to day at a training establishment, for example, in Wagga, where we've got most of our trainees, we will have 3 back-to-back classes of PT usually to start the day. Then we'll have a lunchtime circuit, and then you'll have PT at the end of the day. So you've got any given day 5 PT classes to run. Then outside of that time, we did get time to train ourselves, which was great. But then we also run, part of our job was adventure training. So we would run high ropes courses, abseiling off. We had a water tower, which was 50 metres. So for promotional courses.
Sounds like an adventure fit trip.
Yeah, that's it. So so we'd also have those things to run outside of the classes. But because there's a few staff, you weren't going to get put on everything all in one hit. But the day-to-day was definitely PT for the first 3 hours of the morning. Then, between the couple of hours between lunch, then, it was either adventure training or we'd have a little bit of time to train. And then you've obviously just got your normal admin stuff as well. But it was pretty fun.
Yeah,
it was good.
Sounds like it would have been unbelievable fun. But so what's it look like for an actual cadet or whatever you would call it in the Air Force? Like, what does their training look like? So they're doing one of these sessions? They're doing double days?
They're doing one, so they'll get 3 sessions a week. So
right.
it's not as hectic
like
as the
SEAL
movies.
training.
Or SEAL training. So
I
even remember getting ready for recruit training thinking, we're going to go there and get smashed.
Yeah,
I'm watching
running through barbed wire fences. Electrocuted.
Watching these movies thinking, oh no. It wasn't quite as full on as that. Their days are fairly active anyway for a recruit because they're up and about early. They're marching around anyway. And a lot of it now has gone to injury prevention. So the older style of training is definitely effective. We have to come in line with society, and as a community and societies is not as active as it used to be, so we can't get away with as much training without causing more injuries. So
would it just be smarter as well to because like getting someone to the fittest they've ever been and then having them break is obviously not what you want, is it? Do you think that's in line with professional sport as well? Like, because I think some of the practices you would hear about in AFL 30 years ago are quite different to the way that they'd be applied now. You reckon that's similar as well?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. There's certain things that's where, when you look at something like an elite sport with the AFL, there's no doubt. I mean, everyone used to hear the 100s that they'd run or whatever, like that's just never happening these days. They're not even allowed to do goal practice after training, so they don't load their hamstrings too much now.
Get your mates in a circle, and the bloke that didn't get the most possessions on the ground gets beat up by all your mates.
But the military, and particularly through, definitely some of the jobs in the army, they have to still train in that realm where there's a chance of injury because you need to train ready for what you're going to encounter, which you don't know exactly what that's going to be. Yeah. But if you're only training safely all the time and then you go put in this high stress situation, then there's a fair chance you're going to break down.
You can't train sub-maximum all the time and then go to a war zone.
That's it, yeah. So you're definitely not trying to break them, but there's definitely some areas where PT steps up and there's a chance.
And so in the Air Force, with the physical side of it coming into the Air Force, is there tests do you have to go through a certain scenario of what do you have to get through and be competent at to actually make it into the Air Force?
It's very low standard now.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very low now. Yep. So it's dropped a fair bit. So to give you this, it's nearly embarrassing saying this now. For the normal trade, it will be 6.5 on the beep test.
6.5?
Yep, 6.5. So
I can hop 6.5.
Yeah, that's right. You can run it backwards, which we have done before. But
that's right.
Yeah. So 6.5 on the beep test. What is it then? 30-second flexed arm hang. So basically hold yourself above a bar like
that's
this. That's
actually
30 seconds.
Probably harder than the beep test. That's not.
Yeah,
not easy.
In theory it should be.
Yeah.
But some people turn up that obviously have never run at all.
Yeah, for sure.
And then I think it's 30 sit-ups to a 3-second cadence. Very low level. Depending on what trade you're going into, so to be a physical training instructor, the standards are totally different. To apply, that's a week-long testing to get selected for that. If you're going into the army, it's only slightly high though, 7.5 on the beep test.
Really?
So it's quite low. The standards, because, like I mentioned earlier, they are after a job specific or a trade that they want you to be able to complete rather than being a soldier first.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, training for your brain rather than for your body.
Yeah, which is...
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense,
and from a financial perspective, it works better for the government as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because 6.5 on the beep test, in any sort of high-performing sport, you'd be just laughed out the door.
Absolutely, yeah.
I got 14 something one time.
Yeah.
That's a decent beep test is 11 or 12 for sure, 13 I reckon.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
For sure. Oh, that's interesting.
I mean, even the fireys, to get in the fireys is 9.6.
Oh,
so
really?
At least that's at the standard.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. So how long were you in the Air Force for all up?
14 years.
14 years?
Yep.
But you were still halfway in real life and halfway in the Air Force, right? So you still lived a relatively normal life.
Yeah, so, yep, I mean, you've obviously got to move around on postings, but you don't live on base.
Yeah.
The defence really has changed over the last sort of 40, 50 years, where everyone used to live on base, but now no one really does.
Gotcha.
Some single people might in the blocks, but the housing's all gone. Mm-hmm. So you live just out in the community like normal. Like you saw, I was still in the Air Force when I had the gym. Yeah. So you work Monday to Friday most of the time. So you do really have that sort of normal life. It's the people that get deployed, obviously, that get taken away for an extended period of time where it changes a little bit. So
for sure. And do you miss do you miss your time in the Air Force?
Aspects of it. I definitely miss the camaraderie with being a physical training instructor. Very small sections, so you never work with more than sort of 8 people. So you're pretty tight knit.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, you're dealing with a lot of people, but you've got that, and it was always good fun. And we did have time to go out and play games and sport and have competitions, and it was always a fun environment where we're all active and we'd all have some funny stuff to do. Where it might be trying to hop the beep test or just things like that. Like it might be as silly as that. We go out and go, all right, let's go out to the pool and just hold a weight and see who can run the furthest. And then you turn it into a contest where it's like, oh, you made the 50 metres underwater, so now you got to see how far we can go back. It was just cool stuff. It was just fun
for sure.
But then then I still speak to some of the boys and they're still whinging about the exact same thing that I used to whinge about when I was in there. So I think
the one-legged beep test.
I don't. So I don't miss that. So it was a good time. It's definitely set me up for lots of other things that I've done. It's given me a good grounding, a good platform for skills that I've taken on further. But it was a good time. I don't think it's something that I'd want to go back to though.
Yeah. I think of it as a footy club kinda, because I look back at my time playing footy, and I think you just had that instant camaraderie every day. Or for us, it'd be 3 days a week, 3 or 4 days a week. You'd be Tuesday arvo, Thursday Arvo night, Saturday in the day, and then maybe Sunday recovery, you'd be with like 30 or 40 lads.
Yeah.
And there's no end to like laughter and banter and, funny stories and, from everybody's life and so forth. And that's pretty, I feel like, obviously before we started recording, we were talking about something similar about, community stuff and what have you. And I feel like that's pretty important stuff, and like stuff that I particularly look back really fondly on. I was the same with school. Like I absolutely loved my time at school. So many people, I've heard people finish school and they're like, oh Jesus, thank God that's over. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Hanging out with your mates for 8 hours a day, just taking the piss out of teachers and stealing people's lunches. Like that was a great time. So I feel like it'd be a little bittersweet getting out of the military or any sort of
it is, but
like
it's interesting to talk about that. But the bond you get with a lot of the people in defence, because you are like-minded people. That's how you've ended up there.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden you whether it's from defence basketball tournaments or whatever, and then you end up being mates with them. And the mates that I've got from defence are the closest mates that I've got.
Yeah.
So outside of school and anything like that, they're like, spoke about going away next year on a boys trip. That's with all boys from defence still, So you sort of miss having that direct connection with that day-to-day chat on the email or whatever it might be. But, those connections and bonds that you get are just, they're lifelong.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
No, that's great. Yeah. And I so you were never really in any posted scenario where there was, lives on the line and so forth.
No, I actually didn't get deployed. I was at a training establishment when I could have gone, and they wouldn't let me go. But
gotcha.
Even as a PTI, you on deployment, they're still in a relatively safe area.
Yeah,
it's not so much like
you're just doing push-ups out of the back of the shed.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, So I've definitely had a lot of friends that have though, and been in some pretty hairy situations, and and that's. I suppose it's a lot of them when, I know we might talk about a bit about men's mental health later, but it's a lot of those guys that are that make me want to raise this awareness as well.
Yeah. I think the reason I asked that is because I was pretty certain, knowing your background and being mates with you for a long time, that you weren't actually deployed, but I just wanted to clear it up. But even the fact that you weren't deployed, like even what you're training for and what you're preparing yourself for and the investment that you're putting into your time in the military and the Air Force, that's pretty heavy duty stuff. It's not really mucking around. So I feel like the bonds would be strong there because you're like, we're out here to do something. And if push comes to shove, we're the defense of the nation. It's not fucking around. Yep. So I could see that those bonds would be, pretty strong stuff.
Yeah, it is good. Because like you say, if required, you are relying on each other in a life or death situation. So,
right.
it can be,